I exposed her heartless betrayal and rose stronger than ever, turning her smirk into crushing regret as my revenge became her unseen downfall forever. I never imagined I would discover such betrayal through something as simple as a forgotten phone. It vibrated on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. The message preview caught my eye, words that no spouse should ever have to read. My hands trembled as I unlocked her phone. She had never changed her password from our anniversary date. Perhaps that should have been my first clue about how little our marriage meant to her. What I found was worse than I could have imagined. Hundreds of messages, intimate photos, and detailed plans for meetups spanning the last 8 months. I sat motionless at our dining table, the very one we had picked out together during happier times. The shower stopped, and I heard her humming. Actually humming, as if this were just another ordinary evening. When she walked into the kitchen, wrapped in her towel, her expression shifted instantly upon seeing her phone in my hand. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the silence. I simply turned the screen toward her, displaying the most recent exchange with her lover. Here to explain this? Instead of shame or remorse, a strange transformation came over her face. Her lips curled into what I can only describe as a smirk, a look of such callous disregard that it burned itself permanently into my memory. "I guess you were bound to find out eventually," she said with a shrug that dismissed 12 years together as if they were nothing. "Maybe this is for the best." "For the best?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "You've been cheating on me for months, and that's all you have to say?" She leaned against the counter, completely at ease while my world collapsed. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? I'm not. He makes me feel alive in ways you never could." Each word struck like a physical blow. The woman I had built a life with, the person I thought I knew better than anyone, stood before me as a complete stranger. There was no guilt in her eyes, no remorse in her voice, only a cold detachment that chilled me to the core. "Zero remorse for betraying you," she continued, the smirk returning. "That's what you want to hear, right? The brutal truth? Well, there it is." I remained silent, processing this new reality. My mind raced through our history together, the vacations, family gatherings, quiet evenings at home, searching for signs I had missed. How long had she been this person? Had she ever truly loved me? "I'll be staying at his place tonight," she announced, turning to get dressed. "We can talk about logistics later." As she packed an overnight bag with practiced efficiency, something shifted inside me. The initial shock gave way to something else, a cold, calculated resolve. In that moment, watching her casual betrayal, I made a decision. She might feel no remorse now, standing tall in her perceived victory. But by sunrise, I silently promised myself, she would learn what real regret feels like. This wasn't the end of our story. It was merely the beginning of a new chapter she never saw coming. As she walked out the door without a backward glance, I reached for my phone. The first call would be to a divorce attorney. The second, to our bank. By morning, the foundation of my plan would be in place. She thought she held all the power in this moment, but some lessons are learned the hard way, at the break of dawn, when reality finally sets in. After she left, the house fell into a silence I had never experienced before. It was deafening. The emptiness gave me clarity. Rather than drowning in self-pity, I channeled my pain into purpose. The first call to an attorney had been surprisingly productive. She had given me a list of actions to take immediately, and I spent the entire night executing them with methodical precision. By morning, I had changed the passwords to all our joint accounts and moved half of our savings into a private account. Legal, but protective, my attorney had recommended. The smirk on her face kept replaying in my mind, fueling every decision. I took photos of all the evidence on her devices before she could delete them. The affair wasn't just with anyone. It was with her boss at the marketing firm where she had received 2 convenient promotions in the past year. 3 days passed without her returning home. She texted casually on the second day, asking if I had calmed down yet, as if my reaction was the problem. I didn't respond. Instead, I hired a private investigator who confirmed my suspicions within hours. This wasn't her first affair. There had been at least 2 others over the past 3 years. The betrayal ran deeper than I could have imagined. On the 4th day, she finally returned home as if nothing had happened. She walked through the door, dropped her keys in the bowl by the entryway, and asked what was for dinner. The audacity was breathtaking. "We need to talk," I said calmly, gesturing to the dining table. She rolled her eyes but sat down. "Look, I know you're upset, but people grow apart. It happens all the time. Is that what happened with the other two men as well? We just grew apart 3 separate times? I asked, watching her expression shift from confidence to confusion. What are you talking about? Her voice waved slightly. I slid a folder across the table containing photos the investigator had compiled. Dates, hotel receipts, credit card statements. 3 years of lies, 3 different men. The color drained from her face as she flipped through the pages. For the first time, her composure cracked. You had me investigated? That's an invasion of privacy. Interesting, coming from someone who invaded the sanctity of our marriage multiple times, I replied, maintaining the same calm tone. But that's not all. I revealed that I had already spoken with an attorney, secured my finances, and begun divorce proceedings. I explained that I had documented everything about her affair with her boss, information that would certainly interest the company's HR department and his wife. You wouldn't dare, she whispered. The smirk was now completely gone. I already have, I replied truthfully. I spoke with his wife yesterday, lovely woman. She was quite grateful for the information. This was the first chess move in a game she didn't know we were playing. Her boss had already been calling her frantically all day, but she had been too preoccupied with maintaining her casual facade to check her messages. Now her phone began buzzing incessantly as the reality of the situation dawned on her. This isn't like you, she said, studying me with new eyes. You've always been so passive. That word, passive, struck a nerve, but it confirmed what I needed to know. She had mistaken kindness for weakness, compromise for cowardice. She had never truly seen me at all. People change, I echoed her earlier sentiment. Sometimes it takes a betrayal to reveal who they really are. She stayed silent for a long moment before attempting to regain control. Fine, we'll get divorced. But this vindictive streak won't get you anywhere. We'll split everything 50-50 and move on. I smiled for the first time in days. You might want to consult with an attorney of your own before making assumptions about how this will play out. As evening fell, she retreated to the guest bedroom, her phone continuing to light up with messages from her panicking boss. The company had strict policies against relationships between managers and subordinates. The promotions she had received were now under scrutiny. Her carefully constructed world was beginning to unravel, thread by thread. I slept peacefully that night, knowing this was just the beginning. Dawn would bring the next phase of my plan, and with it, her first real taste of regret. The next morning arrived with unexpected developments. Her boss had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. She received the news via a terse email from HR requesting her presence for an interview later that day. The company was moving quickly to distance itself from the scandal. I watched as she paced the kitchen, frantically making calls that went unanswered. What did you tell them? She demanded, her composed facade crumbling further. Only the truth, I replied, sipping my coffee. The same truth you never thought would come to light. She slammed her hand on the counter. Do you have any idea what you've done? This could ruin my career. Interesting how consequences work, isn't it? I observed. Actions eventually catch up to everyone. While she scrambled to salvage her professional reputation, I continued executing my plan with quiet efficiency. That afternoon, I met with our financial advisor, the one she had insisted we use years ago. He had been surprisingly forthcoming once I showed him evidence that she had been siphoning money from our joint accounts into a separate one for nearly 2 years. Small amounts, carefully timed to avoid detection. Money that was meant for our future, for the family we had once planned to build. The financial betrayal stung almost as much as the infidelity. Almost. When she returned home that evening, her usual confidence was noticeably absent. The HR meeting had gone poorly. She was now also under investigation, her recent promotion scrutinized in light of the affair. This is temporary, she insisted, more to herself than to me. A minor setback. They can't prove the promotions were related to personal matters. I said nothing, letting her false confidence echo in the empty space between us. That night, I overheard her on the phone with her lover. Their conversation had shifted dramatically, from passionate exchanges to panic and damage control. He was blaming her for being careless. She was accusing him of prioritizing his marriage over her career. The fairy tale was collapsing under the weight of reality, just as I had anticipated. By day 7 of my plan, the social consequences began cascading. I hadn't needed to contact many people. News travels quickly when it's scandalous enough. Our closest friends reached out to me one by one, expressing shock and offering support after learning about her multiple infidelities. Her sister, whom I had always been close with, called in tears, apologizing for something that wasn't her fault. I suspected something was off when she kept canceling family gatherings, she confessed. I should have said something to you. You couldn't have known, I assured her, genuinely grateful for her loyalty. When the phone call ended, I found my wife standing in the doorway, having overheard enough to realize her sister had chosen sides. You're turning everyone against me, she accused, her voice hollow. I'm not turning anyone against you, I corrected her. I'm simply no longer protecting you from the consequences of your own actions. For years, I had been the one making excuses for her absences at family events, smoothing over conflicts with friends, maintaining the image of our perfect marriage. I had been complicit in crafting the mask she wore. Now that I had stopped, her true face was visible to everyone. That evening, she attempted a new strategy. She entered the living room wearing the dress she knew I loved, hair styled the way I had once complimented, the same perfume from our anniversary filling the air. As she sat beside me on the couch, "We need to talk," she said softly, her hand reaching for mine. "About us, about moving forward." I moved my hand away. There is no us anymore, and the only moving forward happens separately. Her expression hardened for an instant, before melting into practiced vulnerability. Everyone makes mistakes. What we had was special. 12 years shouldn't end like this. It shouldn't have, I agreed. But it did. The moment you decided our marriage wasn't worth respecting. She leaned closer. I can change. We can go to counseling. Start fresh. The manipulation was transparent now that I could see her clearly. Where once I might have yielded, might have grasped at any chance to salvage what we had, I now recognized the hollow promises for what they were. The divorce papers will be ready next week, I stated simply, standing up to leave the room. She grabbed my arm, desperation replacing seduction. Don't do this, you'll regret it. I looked at her hand on my arm, then into her eyes. No, I won't. But sunrise comes for everyone eventually. As I walked away, I heard what sounded like genuine tears for the first time since this began. Whether they were for our marriage or for herself, I couldn't tell. And for the first time, I realized it no longer mattered to me. 2 weeks into the separation, the balance of power had shifted completely. The divorce proceedings were moving forward with unexpected speed, largely due to the evidence I had gathered and her reluctance to contest the terms. Her professional situation had deteriorated rapidly. The company had concluded its investigation, finding that both she and her boss had violated multiple company policies. She was demoted and placed on probation while he was quietly let go. I had moved most of my essential belongings to a new apartment downtown, leaving her in the house we once shared. My attorney advised this temporary arrangement as a strategic move, let her grow comfortable thinking she would keep the house in the settlement. The truth about the second mortgage she didn't know about would come to light soon enough. The morning of our first mediation session arrived with a clear sky and crisp air. I arrived early, dressed in a suit I had purchased specifically for this new chapter of my life. The mediator, a stern woman with decades of experience, reviewed our case files with practiced neutrality. When my wife arrived 15 minutes late, I noticed immediately how differently she carried herself. Gone was the smirk, the casual confidence. She looked tired, diminished somehow. Before we begin, the mediator explained, I want to clarify that my role is not to judge either party, but to facilitate a fair settlement. However, I must note that the documentation provided suggests significant financial impropriety on one side. My wife shifted uncomfortably in her seat. What documentation? The mediator gestured to the thick folder my attorney had submitted. Bank records indicating approximately $47,000 had been diverted from joint accounts to a private account over the past 20 to 3 months. There were also records of purchases made with joint funds that appeared to coincide with hotel bookings during the documented affairs. Her face paled. She had not expected this level of detail, this irrefutable paper trail. She glanced at her attorney, who looked equally concerned. These financial matters complicate the division of assets considerably, the mediator continued, especially given that these actions occurred without the knowledge or consent of the other party. For the next 3 hours, the facade she had maintained crumbled piece by piece. Each document presented revealed another layer of deception. The mediator remained professional, but even she couldn't completely hide her reaction to the systematic betrayal laid out before her. When we took a brief recess, I stepped outside for some air. My phone buzzed with a message from her boss's wife, thanking me again for my honesty and informing me that their divorce was proceeding as well. She had found evidence of other affairs spanning their entire marriage. There was a certain solidarity in our shared experience, a connection forged through parallel pain. When the session resumed, my wife's attorney requested a private consultation. They returned 20 minutes later with a markedly different approach. My client is willing to accept a significantly reduced settlement in exchange for discretion regarding certain personal matters, her attorney stated carefully. My attorney smiled slightly. I believe we're past the point of discretion. The evidence has been submitted to the court and is now a matter of public record. The look of shock on my wife's face confirmed she hadn't understood this critical detail. Court filings are generally accessible to the public. The carefully crafted image she had maintained among our social circle, her workplace, her family, all of it was now vulnerable to anyone curious enough to look. "This can't be legal," she protested, looking between the attorneys and the mediator. "These are private matters." "On the contrary," my attorney replied calmly, "financial records pertaining to joint assets are entirely relevant to divorce proceedings. Nothing submitted falls outside standard practice." As the session concluded, the mediator summarized the proposed terms. I would receive 70% of our assets, including my retirement accounts in full. She would keep the house but would be solely responsible for both mortgages. The investment portfolio would be liquidated to settle joint debts, with the remainder split according to the same 70-30 division. Outside the mediation room, she caught up to me in the hallway. Gone completely was any remnant of the woman who had smirked at my pain just weeks ago. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To humiliate me?" I looked at her for a long moment. "No. I'm simply ensuring that actions have appropriate consequences." "I made a mistake," she insisted, tears forming. "People make mistakes." "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or saying something hurtful in anger," I replied. "What you did was make thousands of deliberate choices over years to betray, deceive, and disrespect me. There's a difference." She wiped at her eyes. "So, this is revenge?" "This is justice," I corrected her. "Closure for both of us." As I walked away, I felt no satisfaction in her tears, no pleasure in her distress. What I felt instead was something I hadn't experienced since finding those messages on her phone: peace, the kind of peace that comes not from punishing another but from finally standing up for yourself. That night, watching the sunset from my new apartment, I realized something important. This wasn't about making her regret betraying me anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity and ensuring that I would never again mistake kindness for weakness, especially my own. 1 month after the mediation session, my transformation was well underway. I had joined a gym and started therapy, 2 steps I should have taken years ago. My apartment, though smaller than our house, felt more like home than any place I had lived before. Each piece of furniture, each decorative touch reflected only my preferences, my taste. There was something profoundly liberating about that simple fact. The divorce was finalized with surprising speed, largely due to her reluctance to contest anything after the mediation. Her attorney had likely advised her that fighting would only extend the public exposure of her actions. The settlement proceeded exactly as outlined, with one additional clause I had insisted upon: a non-disparagement agreement. Neither of us could speak negatively about the other in public or professional settings. This wasn't for my protection. It was for hers, a final act of kindness she would likely never recognize as such. I hadn't spoken to her directly since that day in the hallway outside mediation, but news reached me through mutual friends. She had been passed over for a project that would have helped rebuild her professional reputation. The official reason was team restructuring, but the unofficial word was that the company couldn't risk putting someone with her history in a position of authority. Actions have consequences, some more lasting than others. The house she had fought to keep had become another burden. The second mortgage I had taken out for home improvements years earlier, improvements she had insisted upon, was stretching her finances to the breaking point. She had attempted to sell, only to discover the market had cooled considerably. The dream home was now a financial anchor around her neck. Through it all, I maintained my distance and my silence. This wasn't about watching her struggle. It was about focusing on my own recovery. The weekly therapy sessions had helped me recognize patterns I had ignored for years, how I had consistently prioritized her happiness over my own, how I had excused increasingly disrespectful behavior, how I had built my identity around being the supportive spouse while neglecting my own needs. On a crisp Saturday morning, I was having coffee at my favorite downtown cafe when I glanced up to see her sister entering. We locked eyes, and after a moment's hesitation, she approached my table. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. I gestured to the empty chair across from me. Our conversation began awkwardly but soon found a comfortable rhythm. She was one of the few family connections I had genuinely missed. "How is she?" I finally asked, more out of courtesy than concern. Her sister sighed. "Struggling. But honestly, it's the first time I've seen her face consequences for anything in her life. Maybe that's not such a bad thing." She hesitated before continuing. "She told me she's tried to contact you several times." This was news to me. I changed my number. "Smart," she nodded. "She's not in a good place right now. The kind of not good place where people reach out to exes with grand apologies or desperate accusations. Neither would be healthy for either of you." We finished our coffee with a tacit agreement to maintain occasional contact. As we parted ways, she surprised me with a hug. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I always thought you deserved better. I just never had the courage to say it." That afternoon, I received an unexpected email from my former company. They were launching a new division and wanted to know if I would consider returning in a leadership role. The message came from the CEO directly, mentioning that my professional reputation and integrity were exactly what they needed. The irony wasn't lost on me. While her career was stalling, mine was finding new momentum. I was considering the offer over dinner when my doorbell rang. Opening it revealed the last person I expected to see, her. She looked nothing like the confident woman who had smirked at my pain, nor the polished professional who had built her career partly on her appearance. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, her clothes rumpled as if she had been wearing them for days. "You need to leave," I said immediately, moving to close the door. She blocked it with her foot. "Please, 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." Against my better judgment, I let her in but remained standing near the door. 5 minutes. She looked around my apartment, clearly surprised by how well I was doing. "This is nice." "That's not why you're here," I replied flatly. She took a deep breath. "No, it's not. I came to tell you that I was wrong. About everything. About you." "I don't need your validation," I said. "Not anymore." "I know," she nodded. "But I need to say it anyway. You weren't passive or weak. You were kind and patient, and I mistook that for weakness because that's how broken I am. There was a time when these words would have meant everything to me. Now they felt like closing credits to a movie I had already walked out of. "Your 5 minutes are up," I said quietly. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" I considered the question carefully. I already have. Forgiveness was necessary for my healing, but forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation or forgetting. "I understand," she whispered, though I doubted she truly did. After she left, I stood by the window watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. For the first time since this all began, I felt completely free of the anger that had driven me forward. The woman who had just left was a stranger to me now, not because she had changed, but because I had finally seen her clearly, and in seeing her, I had finally seen myself. 6 months later, I barely recognized my own life. I had accepted the leadership position at my former company, which came with not only a substantial increase in salary but also the opportunity to build something meaningful from the ground up. My team was talented and driven, and for the first time in my career I found myself truly engaged with my work rather than simply going through the motions. The therapy sessions continued, less frequently now. My therapist had helped me understand that my response to the betrayal hadn't been about revenge, but about finally respecting myself enough to demand consequences for actions. The distinction was subtle but important for my continued healing. On a personal level, I had reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I had taken up hiking on weekends, something she had always dismissed as boring. The physical exertion and natural beauty provided a kind of meditation that cleared my mind in ways I hadn't experienced before. I'd even cautiously begun dating again. Nothing serious, just occasional dinners with interesting people who helped me remember that connection was still possible. News about her reached me occasionally, though I never sought it out. She had finally sold the house at a significant loss and moved to a smaller city 3 hours away. The financial hit had been substantial, but the fresh start was probably necessary for her as well. According to her sister, with whom I still maintained occasional contact, she had started therapy too. I genuinely hoped it was helping. It was exactly 6 months to the day since our divorce was finalized when I received an unexpected package at my office. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small wooden box I recognized immediately. It had belonged to my grandfather, a cherished possession I thought had been lost in the move. The letter was brief but clearly difficult for her to write, judging by the crossed-out words and uneven handwriting. I found this while unpacking at my new place. I know how much it means to you. I should have sent it months ago, but the truth is I kept it as some kind of connection to the life I threw away. I'm sorry for that, and for so much more. I understand now what real remorse feels like. Not the kind that comes from being caught or facing consequences, but the deep regret that comes from finally seeing yourself clearly and recognizing how much damage you've caused. I'm not asking for forgiveness again. You already gave that more generously than I deserved. I just wanted you to have this back. She had signed it with just her initials. Another small acknowledgement that we were strangers now, the intimacy of first names no longer appropriate. I placed my grandfather's box on my desk, running my fingers over the intricate carvings he had made himself. Inside were the fishing lures he had taught me to tie as a child, each one still perfectly preserved. The memories they evoked were bittersweet but no longer painful. That evening, I met some friends for dinner at a new restaurant downtown. The conversation was lively, the food excellent. As I looked around the table at these people who had supported me through the darkest period of my life, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. None of them had known me during my marriage. They knew only the person I had become after it. Midway through dinner, I excused myself to take a call from a colleague on the West Coast. As I stepped outside, I noticed a familiar figure across the street. She was with someone, a woman I didn't recognize and hadn't seen me. For a moment I observed her from a distance. She looked different, her hair shorter, her style more casual. But the most noticeable change was in how she carried herself. The performative confidence was gone, replaced by something more genuine and subdued. Our lives had diverged so completely that we were now essentially strangers who once knew each other intimately, a peculiar relationship that few experience. As I watched her walk away, I felt no desire to call out, no urge to make my presence known. The chapter was closed, the book shelved. Returning to the table, one of my friends asked if everything was all right. Better than all right, I replied truthfully. Later that night, back in my apartment, I opened my grandfather's box one more time. Among the fishing lures was a folded piece of paper I hadn't noticed earlier. Unfolding it, I found a photograph of me as a child, proudly holding up a small fish with my grandfather beaming beside me. On the back, in my grandfather's handwriting, were words I had forgotten he had written. Remember, son, your worth isn't determined by what others take from you, but by what you choose to keep. I placed the photo on my nightstand and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new connections. For the first time in my adult life, I was moving forward unburdened by someone else's expectations or limitations. The sun would rise on a day entirely of my own making. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized something profound. The day she had shown no remorse for betraying me, smirking at my pain as if it were inconsequential, hadn't been the end of something. It had been the beginning, painful and unwanted, but a beginning nonetheless. Sometimes the most devastating moments in our lives are actually doorways to versions of ourselves we never knew existed. I had walked through that doorway, step by difficult step, and found someone stronger, wiser, and more authentic on the other side. Someone I was proud to be. And perhaps in her own way, through her own doorway of consequences and regret, she was finding a better version of herself too. That thought brought no satisfaction or vindication, just a quiet peace, the kind that comes when sunrise finally arrives after the darkest night, illuminating a landscape forever changed but beautiful in entirely new ways.